Hello and welcome everybody to a specialty wedge made out of beryllium copper, brought to you by patron Seth. Thank you, Seth, for sending this out for review. Now, as we know, beryllium copper was a go-to choice material for a lot of golfers. Ping made a lot of iron sets with beryllium copper, putters with beryllium copper. It has similar properties to steel, but it's cool. It's weighted differently and it looks cool. It's not shiny and gray. It's coppery and dull. It doesn't reflect sun into your eyes. So in the late 1990s, 2000s, Wilson's making these harmonized specialty wedges. This is a lob wedge, absolutely stunning. And we need to talk a little bit about beryllium copper before we dive into this. It is toxic during manufacture. That's one of the reasons why companies moved away from it. I think in all, it's a good thing to avoid stuff like that. One of my other channels, I review poker chips. For a long time, for decades in Las Vegas, on the Strip, all of those poker chips were leaded. Just white lead powder in those things to give them that weight. And they're moving away from it. You know, do I think that's a good idea? Yes. There are still people who's like, no, we want the weighted chips. They feel better. We can live with the lead. Not my opinion. In my opinion, it's good that we moved away from these. But let's have a look back and see what this offers beryllium copper. We're going to start with a closer look on the review table. You can see here, very easy to recognize from a mile away, harmonized beryllium copper with the Z for harmonized. I don't know what that is. Let me know if you know what that logo is. And then on the sole, that's where the Wilson branding is. You can see this one is a lob wedge. And then Becu right here, the selling point, beryllium copper, black ferrule, the tag's still on it. Do you guys not take tags off of your wedges? Do you just leave them on there? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. So looking at the grooves, just very straightforward specialty wedge grooves. I mean, there's no embellishments on the side like they did in the 50s, maybe the 60s. Just looks really, really solid. I like this matte finish because with this angle, sometimes with the sun, you get this really ridiculous glare. You'll notice some dents here. I've seen steel wedges with similar dents. Not sure what to make of that. We move up the stepped shaft. No shaft label. I did put this here as a reminder, late 1990s. Patron Seth obviously sent this out. And the original Wilson grip, which is crumbling. So this is absolutely lovely. I love the wedge. I love the corrosion on it. Everything about it is just screaming awesomeness. So let's get this out on the range and I'll tell you how it feels. Wilson Harmonize Becu wedge, beryllium copper. Thank you, Seth, for sending this out. Now, real quick, when I think of beryllium copper wedges in particular, I think of the Ping series, like the Ping Zing, the Ping I2, and I think of like these big cavity back beryllium copper irons, wedges, whatever it may be. And so it's nice to see like a Wilson harmonized, more purpose-built wedge, if that makes sense. So from the look of it, it looks like a modern wedge, except it's made out of beryllium copper. How sweet is that? Let's take a couple of warm-up shots here. I'm totally not warmed up. Maybe I'll hit that 100. What are we looking at here? 56? Oh, it's a lob wedge. I'm not going to make it to that 100. Maybe the net in front of it, if I'm lucky. I mean, it just feels that was a pulley one. I mean, it feels amazing. Like it's super, super quiet. Have you guys seen the video of, there we go, it's a little bit straighter, of, look at that. It's a little wet here in Wisconsin. Of, is it Scotty Scheffler with Tiger Woods on the range, where he like totally goes over to Tiger, and or he's like right next to Tiger, and he's like, "What's up with the no divots?" And Tiger's just like casually like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, why no divots?" He's like,
Because when I practice, I don't take divots. He's like, what? What? How's that for intimidation factor? I realize that the camera angle, I'm aiming at that 100 marker, might not be the best. Let me try aiming to my right a little bit. And it's just a lob wedge. I mean, I'm not going to hit anything super spectacular with it, but it goes exactly the distance you want it to. For me, I hit lob wedges about 80, 90 yards. Man, I'm taking these like amazing divots right on the face of my club. So we'll hit one more for you, but yeah, I mean, it sounds great. It feels great. It is made of beryllium copper. Probably not my go-to material, just because of, you know, the history of it. But to some people, they like that because it's more scarce. They stopped production in the 90s, as we all know. But I like the material. I like that it's like a purpose-built wedge, not just part of like a large cavity back set. I'm gonna do more of a knockdown here on this one. Probably gonna, you know, hook it a little bit, whatever. That one did carry to that 100 marker. Great, awesome. As far as like beryllium copper wedges go, is this the best one they ever made?
So this feels super soft. It feels like a really solid lob wedge. It just feels really good. So as a playable wedge, amazing, okay? And as far as collectability, it's scarce. It's beryllium copper, right? So it's collectible and it feels good. I mean, this is the best wedge ever. Everybody should go buy it. But let's pump the brakes for a second. For me, my opinions, beryllium copper, not this particular wedge. I'm talking about the manufacture of beryllium copper in general, okay, over decades, was plagued with very adverse health effects to the people involved with the manufacture. I mean, it was really hard on people's health. So, all of a sudden now, it's like that beryllium copper label is associated with that in my mind. So for me, yes, I have one beryllium copper ping putter. And manufacturers spent lots of money to keep their workforce safe. I get that, okay? So hence the increased cost of production of beryllium copper, increases in scarcity. Okay, so for me, not collectible. Well, what about playable? Would you put that in your bag? No, again, a little bit because of the material, but also because it was so scarce, it didn't really represent a huge population in the golfing community. But it did represent some. So all we can do now is when we look back at vintage clubs, is we have a little window into what life was back then, what life was like back then. And I lived some of it, you know, I've been golfing for decades. But when you look back and you get a window, because I'm corrupted with all the new manufacture, with all the new technology and all the new marketing, all right? And so when I look back, obviously, I can't experience it new like they did back then. But this doesn't appeal to me any more than anything else. Like, I'd rather have a forged wedge than this. At the making of this video in 2023, Vokey are cast, Cleveland wedges are cast. So you really have to move to like a Mizuno brand before you can find some forged wedges. And there are other companies that make forged wedges as well. But I would take a forged wedge from the era, from the early 2000s, late 90s, over this in my bag. I feel like it's more representative, and I feel like they feel just as good, and they're just as playable, in my opinion, just as good as something like this. So for me, this, and the other problem I have with this is it seems like Wilson is just late to the party, you know? And Wilson has been making these for a long time. But this particular wedge, you know, when we talk about late 90s, early 2000s manufacture, just through the 90s, beryllium copper has kind of trailed off. It's like internal combustion, okay? It hasn't yet, but it feels like in the next 50 years, I have no idea, but at some point, it's just going to phase out, and there's going to be one last car that has an internal combustion engine. It'll be something pathetic, like a Prius hybrid, right? Toyota, you know, is hesitant to move to full electrics at the moment, at this very moment in time, because they say battery and charging and infrastructure, all the things just aren't lined up perfectly. So they're sticking with internal combustion. But in the future, I can see, that just phasing out, right? So the last internal combustion from Toyota is a Prius. Yay! Who's going to be excited about that? This is the last Prius ever made. Okay, that's what I feel like this is when it comes to the sentiment of it. So do you want the last Prius? But when internal combustion dies, so when all the major manufacturers stop internal combustion, there's going to be bespoke manufacturers who are still making it, who are still making internal combustion for old cars or for new enthusiast cars, okay? So for me, this is like an old Prius. And that's probably not a fair comparison. It's like, okay, speaking of fair comparisons, speaking of internal combustion. So this is like the Ford F-150 in the Tesla truck versus Ford truck tug of war. Who will win? Have you seen this video? If you haven't, maybe pause this video. I'm going to spoil it right now. This is your opportunity. Tesla truck versus Ford. Who's going to win? All right. Obviously, the Tesla truck. Talk about torque, talk about horsepower, talk about weight, talk about traction, talk about whatever you want. Versus an empty Ford F-150, the Tesla truck wins. Ding, surprise. No, not a surprise. My favorite thing about this happened years ago. My favorite thing about that is Neil deGrasse Tyson. He states the obvious. This is not a fair comparison. I can't remember, I don't want to misquote him, but basically he was saying, I think he mentioned payload of the Ford, and he was like, obviously the Tesla truck is going to win because of all the figures. It just mathematically, that's what's going to happen. That was demonstratable. They just did that on screen. We just saw the video. He was absolutely 100% right. It was not fair. And I was just hoping that Elon Musk would parachute into this conversation and just be like, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. It's just not even a fair comparison. Tesla truck wins. Thank you very much. Take your bows. I'm awesome. But he didn't do that. As I recall, and again, I don't want to misquote Elon Musk either, but he basically said something along the lines of, we do need to come up with a more fair comparison or a more fair test or something. Feeling very apologetic. It's like, what? You could, but why? Because you just made an awesome video. Just stick with it, man. Just take a victory lap. Just dance on Ford's grave. But he didn't, okay? So this is a Ford F-150. That's not a good analogy at all because Ford F-150 is one of the best-selling trucks on the planet. So to me, this is just Johnny come lately, not something I'm interested, made out of a material that I'm not fond of. That's all my opinion, and you know whose opinion is more important than my opinion? Neil deGrasse Tyson. But even more important than his opinion is your opinion. Because if you love this stuff, you can go out and buy it and collect it. And when it comes to a beryllium copper wedge, I've never experienced one quite like this. This is a player's wedge without a huge cavity back, and this is a very capable wedge. So if you're into that, this is amazing, all right? And I'd like to thank Seth for sending this out. Because for me, this is the value of this club. Not because I'm going to put it in my bag, not because I want to collect it, but for making this video because there are lots of things that I want to talk about with beryllium copper and that industry. So thank you, Seth, for sending this out. Thank you to all my other patrons. I really appreciate your support. On Patreon, it's just general support. So it supports this channel, keeps this channel going. I post a few behind-the-scenes pictures and updates and videos. I would really like to thank my patrons. Another way you can support this channel is by visiting my Amazon shop. I have a link in the description below. I am an Amazon associate. I make proceeds from qualifying purchases. Please subscribe. Thank you everybody for watching. I am the Vintage Golfer.